Thank you. Shri Piyush Goyal.
Thank you very much, Honorable Deputy Chairman, for giving me this opportunity to present my views on the budget presented by the Honorable Finance Minister. At the outset, I'm a disappointed man, sir. We have an illustrious Finance Minister, very experienced. The first budget he presented was in 1981, when he became the Finance Minister for the first time. And since then, we have always looked up to him as a beacon of light to take this economy out of the morass that we find itself in. Unfortunately, that is not to be. Despair is spreading, sir, all over India. Corporate India does not believe that this government understands what are the evils afflicting the economy. The middle class is completely shocked and shamed by all the scams that we see with continuous frequency emerging one after the other. And sir, the poor Aam Aadmi whom other members talk about so passionately from the treasury benches, they don't trust the administration of the welfare schemes tom-tommed by this government, which though they may be launched in the name of one particular family over the years, but which are hijacked by administrative failures and corruption of very large magnitude, as evidenced by statements of their own senior leader as far back as 20 years ago, or maybe 25 years ago, when he said 85% of government's expenditure is frittered away in corruption and maladministration. Sir, this government needs to address bigger issues of good governance. They need to address the big issue of debureaucratization rather than just focus on tinkering with FDI and reform, because unfortunately for this government, reform is equal to FDI and they go no further. I think it is time the government realize that there is far more things to reform in our country. People want government to get out of their lives. People want government not to interfere, not to tax every aspect of their life, not to have a license quota raj for everything that they want to engage in. They are looking for freedom. They are looking for freedom from high taxes. They are looking for freedom from the bureaucratic controls over their lives. Sir, I just want to touch upon one or two points since I am on the point of reform before I go further. This government is often alleging that it is the opposition which is responsible for the paralysis of policy reform that this country is urgently asking for. I would like to contest that, sir. We talk of GST. The government is talking of reform in the indirect tax structure by introduction of GST. But what have they done, sir? We have an empowered committee of finance ministers working for the last 4 years. In the last 4 years, the government has not been able to bring even the chief ministers of their own states on the same page as the central government in terms of implementing GST. On this account, sir, let me raise a few points about the GST. While we do not dispute the advantages of having a central tax, which eliminates a lot of duplication in the system, it eliminates the cascading effect of taxes, it eliminates the export of taxes. Probably getting a GST in place may also give states a share of the service tax collected, which, by the way, sir, was a promise by this government when service tax was first introduced in India, that the revenue will be shared with the states. But to date, we have not seen that revenue being shared. However, despite all of these advantages, why are we frittering away the benefits of service tax? We are of a GST tax. We are frittering it away because the government has still not been able to come to modalities of how to implement that tax. They still don't have a common form which can be filed by an assessee, finalized in the GST committee. The central government wants to usurp all the powers. The states are not willing to let go their powers. As of now, about 2 lakh assessees report to the central government in excise, whereas 50-60 lakh assessees are under the jurisdiction of the states. So now a new formula has come, which I don't think the people outside who claim we want GST are aware, that there will be general sales tax will comprise two sections. One a central GST and one a state GST. So I don't know what will be the benefit of such a GST that they are proposing. And then there is no clarity at all on how the assessments will take place, where the returns have to be filed, how the money has to be paid, who will the dealer report to. And I am given to understand that every dealer will have two assessments, one from a central authority and one from a state authority. And then they don't have a dispute resolution mechanism in place. As yet, we don't know how a dispute under the empowered committee will be resolved, because the center wants a veto power while implementing GST or dispute resolution, which obviously the states are not willing to give. Sir, they are also asking that they have not yet even determined the rate at which GST will be taxed. Still there is talk of two rates, but we don't know what those two rates are going to be. We don't know what the floor rate will be. We don't know what the band will be in which the GST will be implemented in various states. We don't know how the money is going to be forwarded to the states in terms of compensation. The central government is still not compensating states for the loss of the CST, which was reduced from 4% to 2%, with the promise, a sovereign assurance, that they will be compensated for the loss. To date, except for the first 2 years, from third year onwards, no compensation, a very small compensation has been given. This year there is no plan for compensation. And the logic being given is that when we announce VAT or the CST reduction, we had said we will compensate for 2 or 3 years. But sir, they had also said that GST will be implemented in 3 years. They have not completed one part of the bargain. They have not implemented GST, but they have stopped compensating the states. How do they expect states to trust such a government? And obviously there is resistance, because the fiscal autonomy of the states is under threat under such a GST regime proposed by this government. Therefore, sir, the GST is not a burden on my head. It is a burden on the centre's head to resolve these issues, sit down with the concerned persons, the concerned states, and find solutions. Sir, we have a great law called the Direct Tax Code, which has been proposed by this government. I am a part of the standing committee, and we have recently put forth our recommendations and report. Sir, the recommendations have come out after detailed examinations of the DTC. But the government chose to take selective parts of the DTC, for example, the general anti-avoidance rules, and implement them in the budget itself, in the original form proposed in the budget, rather than considering the recommendations of the standing committee. So these are draconian provisions. In the normal course, we would welcome them, since they are a tool to fight black money. But sir, we all know, I think many people in this house must have experienced their constituents complaining about the misuse of the tax laws in our country. People come with a gun on their head and say that, look, you deposit tax before 31st March, otherwise I'll penalize you, I'll trouble you, because we have to meet a fiscal target set by the finance ministry. Sir, assessees are also told, you deposit money before 31st March, we'll refund it to you in April. But if you don't deposit it and I don't meet my targets, then I may not get a good posting. Then I may not get a good CR. I may be penalized. Is that how tax administration in a country works, sir? And in that situation, with a provision like GAR, what will happen to the assessees? They will be under continuous pressure with no safeguards brought into the law. I would urge the Honorable Finance Minister to please consider the recommendations of the Standing Committee before finalizing the budget provisions, and bring those recommendations into the GAR provisions as they have been proposed. Sir, the disinvestment process has been a big casualty of this government. The NDA government had initiated a process of strategic sales through auction in a most transparent process. I don't know, some members of the Treasury benches have called them sweetheart deals. I don't understand how an auction where the whole world was invited to participate can be a sweetheart deal. But ever since this government has come, no loss-making PSU has been disinvested. No loss-making PSU has been turned around. No improvement in efficiency of these PSUs is there. All that we have seen is a sporadic sale of some shares of PSUs, which have not even met the disinvestment targets of the last 3 years. Is that what is the solution to the disinvestment or to the raising of revenues through alternate methods? I would urge the Honorable Finance Minister to look at that big pool of asset in the government's hand. Today the PSUs here, sir, just the listed PSUs have a market cap of 14 lakh crores. The rest of the PSUs with all the assets put on would be not less than worth another 20 lakh crores. So he has an asset base of 30 lakh crores. He is already on record that government can disinvest up to 51%. Why not take that forward faster? Why not take the process forward to raise revenues from alternate mechanisms, like the Honorable Leader of Opposition said, through auction or transparent method of selling the natural resources of the country or the assets of the country which can be better utilized or exploited in the hands of the private sector, maybe through public-private partnership. I would urge the government to look at this investment in a more holistic fashion and take this process forward. Sir, one other suggestion I want to make, sir, we should move the government to the accrual system of accounting. It will take care of the earlier problem that I mentioned of tax officials troubling the assessees during the end of the year just to meet fiscal targets. It is high time the government also started accounting for its assets, expenses, incomes on an accrual basis, which is an internationally accepted correct method to account for government revenues. Sir, my dear friend, Honorable Mr. Manishankar Iyer, very selectively chose one statistic, and unfortunately for him, he chose a statistic on which this government and unfortunately India as a whole has been a complete disaster. He chose a statistic of debt to GDP ratio in order to highlight how India is a great story with 63% debt to GDP ratio and a completely amusing and amazing statistic of China having 155% debt to GDP ratio. I wonder where he got those statistics from. I would urge the Honorable Finance Minister to please appraise his esteemed colleague what the real facts are. But in any case, I will highlight the real facts, sir. The fact of life is that whereas India has a debt to GDP ratio of 66.2% in 2011, China has a debt to GDP ratio of only 16.5% in 2011. Sir, since you are busy, I'll repeat. India is 66.2%, China is 16.5%. I wish the treasury benches had some more economically savvy people to give at least the correct facts on the table. And then unfortunately it chose a country like China, which on almost every parameter has beaten India. Whether you look at per capita income, whether you look at GDP growth, whether you look at forex reserves, whether you look at FDI, and I can continue to name so many more. China has beaten India hollow, and we have to put our act in order. We have to start acting fast if the dream to make India a superpower has to be achieved. And for that, I would urge the Finance Minister to please take these large figures, the large deficits that he is proposing in his budget more seriously, and not tinker away the resources of this country on large subsidies which are being wasted and not implemented properly. In the same light, sir, foreign exchange reserves. What is the current account situation in this country today? Last year, the current account deficit was over 3.4 or 3.5%. So even in 1947-48, when the country gained independence, the current account deficit was not such an alarming figure. It was probably less than 2.5%. And look at the foreign exchange reserves. Mr. Manishankar Iyer went about harping on the NDA government performance. So I did a little calculation. When the NDA came to power in 1998, they had forex reserves of $29 billion. When they demitted office in March 04, the reserves were $113 billion, which shows a growth of 289% over 6 years. So about 48% every year. This government, sir, came in 2004 with $113 billion reserves. Today, as on 16th March 2012, the forex reserves are 294.821 billion. That is a growth of about 161% in the last 8 years of mismanagement of the economy. And that shows a growth of only 20% a year in our forex reserves. And I have gone through the economic survey. On every page, I can do a statistical analysis to show how the economy was far better handled by the NDA government vis-a-vis the UPA government. Take the case, sir, of inflation. I beg to correct myself, sir. The first budget that Pranab presented was for the year 1982-83. I stand corrected, sir. Sir, in the fifth para, page 1 of that budget speech of 82-83, Honorable Finance Minister, sir, had said, the fight against inflation has been a high priority of the government. Any slackening of effort on this front would have undermined the very basis of our development. Inflation hurts all sections of the community, but it hurts the weaker and poorer sections the most. Inflation also hurts the development process as investment costs get distorted and financing becomes an increasingly severe problem. So this is what we were assured would be the mantra of the Honorable Finance Minister when he presented the last 2 budgets that I have seen. Unfortunately, sir, on the front of inflation, this government has failed miserably if you see the statistics. When the NDA government came in power in 1998, they were handed a headline inflation, which during 91 to 96, the previous Congress regime, was 9.3% per annum. It was the NDA which, through sheer fiscal prudence, brought it down to 4.9% per annum. From 9.3 to 4.9% in the 6-7 years that we were in power. We almost reduced the WPI inflation to half. Unfortunately for this country, the UPA came back into power, sir. And in the last 7 years, up to 2011, headline inflation was at an average of 6.2%, again inched up year on year. Of course, the last year has been even worse. We have seen double-digit inflation all through the year, except the last 2 months, but that also more because of the base level effect. When the base was higher last year, it shows that the inflation has come down. Similarly, on food inflation, sir, during the NDA regime, food inflation was at an average of 3.5%. But the 7 years of this government, it has been in double digits at an average of 10%. And if you take only the last 5 years, it is 12% per annum. So in terms of statistics, we can keep going till the cows come home, and there will be enough statistics to show how this government has mismanaged the economy. So one other figure that Mr. Manishankar Iyer spoke about, and I was very amused at how selectively statistics can be used for distorting the correct picture. He spoke about the interest outgo in the Honorable Finance Minister's budget versus the revenue receipts. So I sat down with a calculator, took out all the old information, and look at what I found, sir. This government was in office till 91 to 96. They left behind an interest to revenue receipts ratio of 47%. And when the NDA government came into power in 98, we were handed over an interest to revenue receipts of 49%. So it was 47 during the original Congress rule, 49% when the NDA came to power. Again, through sheer fiscal prudence, by the time we left office in 2004, we had brought it down to 41% in the budget estimates of 4-5, which were actually achieved. It's not like the present government, and my honorable leader mentioned that they give some figures which are never to be achieved. But our figures used to be achieved. We brought it down to 41%, which is a reduction of 16%. 49 to 41 is a reduction of 16%. But there again, sir, in the last 7 years of the UPA rule, they have been able to bring it down in the 2011-12 revised estimates to 36%, which is a fall from 41 to 36%, only 12% reduction. So despite having a much better fiscal position than what we had, they have not even been able to reduce it as much as we had reduced it. So I wish Mr. Manishankar Iyer would either check his statistics better. Maybe he can consult somebody like me. I'll help him to run through statistics and give more factual statistics rather than giving distorted figures which don't mean anything. And the most amusing, I repeat, is that China 155% debt to GDP ratio. That's the best of them also. Sir, one very interesting figure came to my notice when I was going through the budget in detail. So when the NDA government, since they like to talk, everything is the blame of the NDA government, I thought let me highlight some of the achievements which are far more important than the so-called blame. So when the NDA government left office in 2003 and 4, the actual figures for 3-4 in the last year we were in power, our non-plan expenditure on revenue side was 2,83,000 crores. And on capital account was 65,000 crores. Whereas in the current budget of 12-13, they have increased the revenue account to 8,65,000 crore and capital account to 1,04,000 crore. So sir, in the 7 years that they have been here, or 8 years now, they are increasing the revenue account by 200%, whereas the capital account expenditure is only increasing by 50%. And the same goes in the plan expenditure. The revenue account expenditure from 4 to 12 has increased from 78,000 to 4,20,000 crores, which is an increase of 450% on the revenue account. And on the capital account, 43,000 crore to 1 lakh crore, which is only 150%. What does that show you, sir? It shows you completely a government which is focused on vote bank politics. They are throwing away the money of this nation, creating large fiscal deficits only on the revenue account, costing the nation and the future generations of this country huge problems as we go in the future. And that, by no stretch of imagination, is fiscal prudent management, prudent fiscal management. I think a good government would have spent more money on creating assets of this country, spending on the capital account, rather than wasting away money on the revenue account. And of course, I just wanted to highlight one small thing. The Honorable Finance Minister has projected GDP to grow by 14% last year's budget and again 14% this year's budget. Now he did achieve 14% in last year's budget, but not by nominal genuine growth. The nominal growth is 14%. The real growth is, as he has himself acknowledged, 6.9%. which I personally contest, because that figure is based on the first 3 quarters. Last quarter is worse than the previous 6.1. I think the 6.9 will be left at about 6.5 by the time we get the actual figures. Having said that, he still achieved 14%. So how did he do that? The rest was inflation. Now in the current year, we are told that it will again be 14%. Now I am just calculating that if the growth is going to be 6.9 this year and 14% nominal growth, that means he is already budgeting for 7% inflation. Final figures, whatever they may be. Today, we are already budgeting a 7% inflation in this. Final figures, I suspect, would again be a double-digit inflation with the pressures of large indirect taxes, and the lower growth would compensate it by the inflation. You will again have 14% growth, yes, but
Mr. Goyal,
means of inflation.
Mr. Goyal,
Obviously, in terms
Mr.
of
Goyal,
subsidy,
Mr. Goyal, your party has about 10 speakers.
yeah. In
Keep in
terms of
mind.
subsidy,
So try
the
to
Honorable
control.
Finance Minister has under-provided so grossly that I'm amazed that even a common reader, sir, I gave a speech in March last year on last year's budget, and I've raised exactly the same points. A common reader of the budget could glance at it and tell you subsidies were under-provided, revenues were over-provided. It didn't need rocket science to understand that, sir. But again, this year it's the same ploy. Show low subsidies, show higher revenue growth, fool the public, because after all, public doesn't bother about the revised estimates of last year. वो तो हो गया, पीछे की बात है, आगे देखो. So you tell them, आगे तो बहुत अच्छा होने वाले. The future is rosy. Forget the past. So that in 2013, when we come back to debate again, and I hope my party gives me a chance to speak again, we will again see a picture, an actual picture, when you will have all these figures going wrong and nothing to write home about.
Yes, please. I think you can conclude.
Yeah.
You are searching for points.
No, I've got so many, it's right all over the place, sir.
Okay. Because number of speakers
Sir,
are
I
there
think
from
the
your party.
service tax is one area I want to highlight to the Honorable Finance Minister when I talk about this budget being less than honest in its figures. And I hope I'll get some answers. I have sought protection from the chair on many an occasion. This is my 7th or 8th intervention in the House in the last 1.5 years. To date, I have got no response to any of what I have raised. But then that's another story. I hope the parliamentary procedures bring in some mechanism that we get a response to our word. So they have shown service tax to grow from 95,000 crores to about 1,24,000 crore, an increase of only 29,000 crore. So the projection being made is not a very big burden on the Aam Aadmi. Sir, I contest that figure, and I'll tell you why. Sir, the Honorable Finance Minister is on record saying there will be a 14% GDP growth, and we all know that services is growing faster. It compensates for the lower agriculture and manufacturing growth. Last year's service tax grew from 71,000 to 95,000 crore, which is 34% growth, without any increase in rates. This year, and last year also, GDP was slated to grow 14%. So by that same logic, this year also in the normal course, without increasing the tax rate and without increasing the scope of services to be taxed, there should be a 35% growth in service tax. However, to be more conservative, I've taken 30% in the normal growth. So 95 plus 28,000, 30% is the normal growth in service tax. Now they have also increased the service tax scope. Daira badha diya, expanded the scope, everything under the earth except 17 items. Now I have assumed that will add another 25% to this. So another 32,000 crores can get added by the expanded scope. So total becomes 1,55,000 crores. And then there is a 20% rate increase from 10 to 12%, another 31,000 crores. So the effective tax on service tax alone, I suspect, sir, could be 1,86,000 crore by the time the year ends. The additional burden on the common man, as my honorable leader said, the Prime Minister is on record in 91 to state indirect taxes are an inefficient way of taxing the people. It's a burden on the common man, should not be resorted to. But what we are seeing is a 91,000 crore burden on the common man, which in addition to a customs increase of 33,000 crore and an excise increase of 44,000 crore is of phenomenal proportion to the common man, sir.
Okay, please conclude.
Just one other thing, sir. They are talking of excise increase of 30% in the current year. Out of that, 20% is due to the rate increase. So they are saying only 10% will be the real growth of excise collected. that they are already acknowledging that production and manufacturing in India is dead. There is no hope for Indian manufacturer, domestic manufacturer. But on the custom side, without any increase in rate, there is an increase of 22%. So are we going to see an increasing and overarching dependence on imports in the years to come, causing the Indian economy to be shattered and the foreign economies to gain at the expense of the large domestic market that
Okay,
we have
please.
in India?
Now, please, Goyal ji, please conclude.
However, sir, as
No,
we can
please.
see, today we are in a situation
Please.
where as long as this Indian government does not take proactive steps
Okay.
to ameliorate the problems of the poor, effectively give them relief from the high dose of taxation, do something for good health care, quality education. I was amazed to see the Honorable Mr. Mani Shankar Iyer quoting statistics that a 9th standard boy cannot read a 2nd standard textbook. I don't know whether you're speaking from my benches or from their benches. I think it's an insult of the government of the day. If that is the status of the Tom Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan,
Please.
if the NRHM loop is going to continue in this country, then is health really going to reach the common man?
Okay, please.
What is in this budget for tourism? What is in this budget for infrastructure? And all that they can do is retrospective amendments where SEZ story has been killed, foreign investment will be killed, and we'll have a situation where India will once again go back to the old days of backwardness and lose that great momentum
Okay, please,
that we
take
have
your seat.
achieved in the last few years.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
No, thank you very much.